talking today about Utah's new state flag. For those of you not aware, Utah has a new state flag, which will be officially adopted on Utah Flag Day, which is March 9th, 2024. So this is the new Utah state flag. So I was going to talk a little bit about the history of Utah state flag and how you go about getting a new state flag and retiring your seal-on-a-bedsheet. So history of Utah's state flag. The original name that was proposed for the state of Utah is actually the state of Deseret. And we have the territorial flags of the state of Utah before Utah was officially joined the Union in 1896. On the first flag here on the top, we have the national flag, which was in 1849, and that was displayed during the Pioneer Day celebration and in Salt Lake City in 1849. Utah's Pioneer Day is a state holiday on July 24th, which recognizes when the pioneers first settled the Salt Lake Valley. Then we later had the Deseret national flag. Again, we see another bird, eagle here on the flag. Utahns have an affinity, a love for flags, and particularly large flags. In fact, the largest flags that you see flown on football fields is actually manufactured by a company in Utah. If you drive along I-15 along the freeway, you can see their big sign right and they make most of your large flags that are flown there, and one of the largest manufacturers of flags. When Utah joined the Union, the largest flag at the time in the world was actually the flag to recognize and celebrate Utah's admission to the Union in 1896. Measured 74 feet by 132 feet, and that was sewn by hand by seamstresses in Utah. Utahns also have an affinity for flags. This actually goes back to the Book of Mormon, which is considered sacred scripture by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's one of the individuals in the Book of Mormon is Captain Moroni, who raised the title of liberty, which was a flag. He raised that among the people and inspired the people. And so you can see Utahns have a large and love for flags. Now, Utah didn't have a flag until the World's Fair in St. Louis, and we had the governor's flag. And this was not officially adopted by the state legislature, but there was the World's Fair in St. Louis, and the organizers they were going to have the parade of flags. And there wasn't a flag for Utah. So they asked the governor to come up with a flag and delegated that to the Daughters of American Revolution and came up with the flag design that we have here at the 1903. So it has the crest, and this was on a blue background. Then finally in 1911, March 9th, that's where we get Utah State Flag Day, was the Utah state flag that was officially adopted by the state legislature. So this is the design that was adopted, and it was actually on the USS Battleship, was sunk during Pearl Harbor. And you can see this flag actually if you go to the old courthouse in Beaver, Utah. And I did a little trip this summer with my children, and I'm writing a book on historic courthouses of Utah, and they actually have this flag on display there. Now, we have the Utah state flag that was adopted, and so we have several different symbols on the flag. We have the year 1896 that represents the year of Utah's admission to the flag. This is the old historic flag. Then we have the eagle. Again, we see a representation of that. We had an excellent presentation today on birds on flags. Then we also have the word industry, and then in the center we have the beehive. And the beehive, as we can see, is a symbol, and that also goes back to the Book of Mormon, where you had the Jaredite people who brought with them Deseret, which is interpreted meaning the honeybee, and represents that. As we can see, here's the white background. There was actually a mistake for nearly 100 years with the Utah state flag. And from 1922 until 2011, the white background that we saw on the seal on this flag was changed in 1922. And it was actually an error by manufacturer. And so we had this blue background behind the shield on the flag, and we saw that incorporated in the flag. So here's a correction that was adopted by the Utah Legislature in 2011. Minor modification, but they restored the original white background of the Utah state flag. Interesting point. I'm also a lawyer, and so I went to court once, and I saw the different flags. There was the Utah state flag and then the American flag, and I told the judge, I said, "Judge, you have the wrong flag for the state of Utah. It was the old flag before the 2011 correction." And he says, "Well, I'll just change it the next time they change the flag." So that was the response from the judge. So now Utah is one of the states that has the so-called seal-on-a-bedsheet flag, and which is described as drab or boring. In fact, the 2001 survey was done by NAVA. Utah's flag was ranked near the bottom, 36 among 50 states. And I'll tell you just an interesting story about the Utah state flag. There was a gentleman who went to a Walmart store to purchase a Utah state flag. He comes home and he finds out it was actually the Nebraska state flag. Very indistinguishable from other states, right? And if you actually look on states that border Utah, many other states also have the seal-on-a-bedsheet design, including some of the neighbors, Nevada, among others. Why do so many states have the seal-on-a-bedsheet? That's a good question, and I've tried to research that a little bit. Part of that goes back to the old Civil War tradition, and that we have the Union, right, versus the Confederacy. Another reason is it's not offensive to just put a state seal on a blue background, right? And really, I used to work in the California state legislature, and as we see, getting anything through a state legislature has to be a compromise, right? You have legislators who represent multiple different constituencies, and to get anything through, it really requires a great deal of collective effort. And it's, you have flags that some people love, some people hate, right? It can sometimes even be very polarizing. Some flags, as we see with the Nazi flag and the old Soviet Union flag. So some flags are considered very offensive. And so that's one reason why so many states have adopted that, is they don't want to upset people. So Utah has considered over many years proposing different flags. There was, in 2021, we had the Utah State Task Force. The legislature had passed this task force to say, let's consider adopting a new state flag. And so this task force consisted of the governor, and then we had the lieutenant governor and 6 legislators. So we had a group of elected leaders, and their goal was to create what was known as the people's flag. It wasn't going to be a flag of just one person. This was going to be a flag from multiple different people. And at that same legislative session, Utah adopted the commemorative flag, the 2021 commemorative flag, as we can see on the slide here, that also has the beehive in the middle with the red, white, and blue. And this was to recognize Utah's 125th anniversary of admission to the Union. And so then we had this More Than a Flag initiative that was adopted, and was trying to get people to come up with ideas on designing a new flag. They had over 7,000 submissions for different flag ideas. You had children in elementary schools who were creating their design for flags and submitted those. And it was a collective effort. And again, the goal was to create the people's flag. In fact, my own children going to elementary school came up with different designs, and that was kind of neat. I was working with them, saying, well, what do you think should be included in the flag? So there was a design committee, and came up with 20 different semi-finalist flag designs. You can look through here and see what your favorites are. I'm sure we could get 20 different ideas. These were some of the ideas. In fact, and they didn't want to just have it on a piece of paper or electronic screen. They actually manufactured these semi-finalists as flags and displayed those throughout the state. In fact, where I live in Logan, Utah, which is about 90 miles north of Salt Lake, in front of the old historic courthouse, they flew these the 20 flags for about a week, and that was neat. So you could actually see the flags, how they should be displayed, right? And that was a great way to be able to convey that. It was all the way down in south in St. George, and with other and in Salt Lake at the Capitol complex, so that people could actually see what they look like, and then they can decide. And you could submit comments. There was an online form where citizens can submit their ideas. And so there was the final submission that was actually submitted to the legislature. And so this was the design. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the tweaks that they made to it, but this was the flag version that was submitted. And as you can see, the different symbols on the top and this had an 8-point star, and the flag that was ultimately adopted was a 5-point star. But the red rock on the bottom represents the red color represents the red rock in southern Utah. If you go to Zion National Park or Arches National Park, it has the very distinctive red rock, and it's actually known as Red Rock Country, and very beautiful. And we have millions of visitors that go to the national parks there, and including Arches, when the government is not shut down, of course. And so there was this legislative debate in the Utah Legislature, and it was the most polarizing bill in the 2023 legislative session. And you had those people who said, we love the new flag design, we need to get a new flag. You had those people who say, you're trying to destroy our history. This is wokeism, and this is a waste of time, a waste of money. And you had a very, very divided legislature, and people were attending committee hearings, and there was actually this initiative that was formed called Save Utah's Flag. It was an organization, grassroots organization. They wanted to save the historic flag. Well, ultimately, it passed very narrowly by the Utah House of Representatives, 40 to 35 vote. It's a very, very close vote. And even within, it wasn't really divided by Democrats and Republicans, because Utah is a very one-party state, but it was actually a lot of Republicans that were actually against this. So it's kind of interesting as that. And then it passed the Senate. Governor Spencer Cox, he was an advocate for the flag. And of course, we also had several representatives, including Senator Dan McCray, who was very influential. And as far as the design committee, we also had Ted Kay, who was also involved with that, actually moderated the design committee, and a number of other people with NAVA were also involved with that. So this is the final version that was adopted by the Utah Legislature. And I'm just going to kind of go over some of the symbols that are in this flag. So we have the beehive, again, that is in the middle, that represents industry, community, and the year 1847. And we saw that with the original historic flag, and now on the new flag. We also have the red rock, as I mentioned. On the bottom, we have the white, which represents the snowy peaks, the mountains. Skiing is a big deal in Utah, right? We have Park City, who hosted the Olympics. They're trying to get the Olympics again in 2030 or 2034. And then we also have the red, white, and blue represent freedom and country. It was changed from 8 stars to a 5-point star. And the 5 stars actually represent the original 5 recognized Native American tribes, including the Paiute tribe, the Navajo, the Ute tribes. Now, what about going to do the old flag, right? Well, are we just going to crumple it up and put it into a trash can? No. Is it going to be like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they just throw it into a big government building, right? A big government warehouse? No. And one of the things is that the historic flag will actually be shown and displayed on special holidays during the state at state government buildings, including the Utah Capitol Complex. And so Utah's law actually requires that the historic flag be shown beneath the new Utah state flag when they are displayed. Governor Spencer Cox, the Utah governor, he signed the bill, but he said, I will sign it, but I'm proposing that the historic flag fly above the new flag on these special days when they're flown together. And so he asked the legislature, and they'll convene in January, was when the legislature meets, which is before the official adoption. So we might see some new things that go in the new legislative session. But Governor Cox, he signed the bill, but with that one recommendation. So we'll see if Governor Cox's recommendation actually gets adopted. Now, the Utah model can serve as an effective way for other states that might be considering adopting new state flags and retiring their seal-on-a-bedsheet designs. I used to live in Minnesota for 8 years, or my wife would say 8 winters, but we have the Minnesota flag, right? And there's actually a proposal. They actually met last month, their task force committee, to consider new designs to replace the Minnesota's flag. And what it really does, it requires a collaborative effort, not just from one person. If you get one person, you're not going to get a new state flag. Even the governor is not going to be able to get this through. You need the people to come together. You need legislators. You need the governor, and ultimately the will of the people. I was a political science major as an undergraduate. I teach legal courses, and really what it does is to get anything through Congress or through a state legislature does require collective effort. Now, Utah is interesting. Even after adoption of the flag, there was an initiative that trying to get signatures to save Utah's flag, but they didn't get enough signatures on the ballot to be able to get that. So other states that might consider adopting a new state flag might consider adding not just giving it to the legislature and the governor to decide, but maybe consider a straight up or down vote in an initiative for states. I think that actually might be an interesting way of approaching. Give it to the people, let them decide, give them a straight yes or no, should we adopt a new flag, give them a design. And I think that might be another way to involve the people more. So that's just a kind of a summary of the Utah state flag. I think it's interesting just to see how flags change throughout time, right? And we've seen different developments for different state flags with that. So that's my presentation. I know we're kind of, everybody's excited to go to lunch here. So, and yeah, do we have any questions? Yeah, that's a really good question I was going to have. So it was originally 8 Native American tribes, but they were not the 8 tribes that were federally recognized. So then they changed it to a 5-point star to represent the 5 tribes that were actually federally recognized. I think from aesthetics, I think the 5-point looks better too than the 8-point star on that. So the question is, can you create your own state flag? Is that the question? You can certainly propose that, and you can contact members of the legislature. And of course, if you want to flag your own, display your own flag, you're certainly entitled to do that. In fact, my article that I wrote in Raven several years ago was on the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act, which was basically dealing with HOAs and restricting the display of the flag. But you can certainly, if you're in a different state, if you live in Texas, but you've relocated from Maryland and you want to display the American flag, First Amendment freedom of speech, you can display that as much as you want. Does that answer your question? The question was, could anyone submit a flag design? No, it wasn't restricted to individuals from the state of Utah, but there was a design committee, and that design committee considered different designs. And they actually had a $5,000 prize that was awarded to the flag that was ultimately selected. And because it was really a collaborative effort from multiple people, they shared that $5,000 prize with 100 different people that were all recognized. Yeah, and other states have adopted historic flags, and that was actually one thing that Governor Cox had proposed, of saying we're not just going to throw it away. I'm not aware of adding additional stars on the historic flag to distinguish it, but that might be an option that the legislature might. Again, the legislature will convene again in January, and the official flag will not be adopted. The effective date is until March 9th. So we'll still have to wait and see what happens with the legislature to see if they might take it up, and who knows what they might get enough votes to bring back the old flag. And yeah, so right now it's just in the early stages of a proposal for the Massachusetts flag. Right now, I believe it's going through a committee, and working on that. So there's different submissions, and I'm not as familiar with the process with Massachusetts, but I know it's through a process.